H.R. 1, it's called the For the People Act. I got another email this morning from one of the right-wing groups that the Koch network funds, calling it the Gag Act, right? Because it's going to require that when billionaires pour money into politicians, down politicians' throats, that they be identified. Oh my God. We might find out which billionaires are giving how much money to which politicians. That would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just really gagging the right of free speech. But anyhow, it is being debated right now in the House of Representatives. This is a big deal, and it's important to call your member of the House of Representatives right now and the Senate, frankly. You have 2 senators and 1 member of the House, and let them know that H.R. 1, the For the People Act, is a high priority to you. If it is. It is a very high priority for me because this is basically the reinvention. Well, it's not specifically the reinvention of the Voting Rights Act. There's another piece of legislation that does a lot of that. But what it does is it clarifies, expands, and regularizes voting processes across the United States in ways that will basically make it easier to vote and keep it quite hard to vote in a way that is fraudulent. Nobody wants fraudulent voting. Nobody wants so-called voter fraud. Democrats don't want it. You know, the majority of it that was identified, for example, in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania found 4 people who were dead, who were voted, whose ballots were voted by their by their living relatives. 4 of them. 3 of those 4 cast votes for Donald Trump. So the majority of the voter fraud we know in this country, and the one instance of actual ballot harvesting that we've seen where somebody went around from home to home and bought people's unfilled out ballots and then filled them out for a particular candidate and submitted them. That one instance in either North or South Carolina, pretty sure it was North Carolina, that was somebody acting on behalf of a Republican congressional candidate. So the vast majority of so-called voter fraud that happens in the United States happens by and on behalf of Republican candidates. So, you know, I don't want this going on. You don't want this going on. And the Republicans, of course, have been squealing about this since 1980 as an excuse to try to shut down voting, dial back on the number of polling places and things like that in predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhoods. But this H.R. 1, the For the People Act, it reduces the ability of individual state legislatures to engage in voter suppression. It does away largely or dials back substantially partisan gerrymandering, where you've got a situation where more than half of all the people who voted for a member of the House of Representatives in Wisconsin, for example, or in Pennsylvania, for example, voted for a Democrat, yet both those states sent a majority of members of to Congress of Republicans. Why? Because of gerrymandering. It promotes transparency around money in politics. It defines more clearly exactly what political corruption is and criminalizes it. And of course, all these are the reasons why the Koch network and other right-wing billionaires and groups like FreedomWorks are just hysterical about it and are calling it the Gag Act. And they just sent out a massive mailing this morning asking everybody to please call your member of Congress and tell them to stop the Gag Act, H.R. 1, in its tracks. Well, you need to be calling your member of Congress and saying, we would like H.R. 1 very much, thank you, please. And that number is 202-224-3121 to call Congress, 202-224-3121. And as if to highlight the importance of this, this is the latest, right? This is from a piece over on Alternet by Igor Darish. At least 253 bills with provisions restricting voting access have been introduced, pre-filed, or carried over in 43 states, mostly by Republicans, according to the Brennan Center. The Brennan Center notes that this is in response to, quote, a rash of baseless and racist allegations of voter fraud and election irregularities that former President Trump and his Republican allies promoted for months without any evidence. Mark Elias, who is one of the Democratic attorneys working on this, he's also the co-founder of Democracy Docket, one of the pro-voting rights Democratic groups, says, we're about to be hit with a tidal wave of voter suppression legislation by Republican legislatures across the country. We will see, as a result of that, a, quote, contraction of voting rights like we have not seen in recent memory. And this week, of course, the Supreme Court is hearing another case where Republicans in Arizona want to dial back on the rights of people to vote in Arizona, make it harder and harder to vote in Arizona. And we will find out exactly how partisan the 6 conservatives on the court are. Historically, they have voted along virtually entirely partisan lines. And I'm expecting that, that's going to continue. I mentioned the Republican Attorneys General Association. The RAGA, Republican Attorneys General Association. Turns out that they, in addition to a group, the Rule of Law Defense Fund, that is a subsidiary of RAGA, the Republican Attorney Generals Association, did a January 5th robocall to right-wingers on their list, encouraging people to show up at the Capitol on January 6th. They also held a secret war games event back in September to plan for what they were going to do, what Republican attorneys general were going to do if Trump lost the election on November 3rd. There were 44 senior attorneys general staff present, 32 in person and 12 virtually. They held 30 meetings for state attorney general senior staff between July of 2020 and mid-January of 2021, including one on January 5th. The day before the riots in the Capitol. 19 corporations paid for special access to Republican attorneys general and their staffs. RAGA's vice president, Mr. Schmidt, called that, quote, the business of making friends. Right. Elad Gross, who's a St. Louis attorney who found out much of this stuff with the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, said, quote, most states, if not all, have laws prohibiting the use of state employees for political purposes. It was incredible to see the degree to which they have been involved with the RAGA and its subsidiary. We found that a political dark money organization was coordinating with state officials and their staffs all across the country for many months prior to the January 6th Stop the Steal event. They continued to meet after the election right up through January 5th. And then he adds, probably the most amazing thing to me is how they were selling access to large campaign donors, giving $50,000 in many cases. Those donations were getting them official access, not only to attorneys general, Republican attorneys general, but also to their senior staffs. And then, for example, the Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, has touted in her online biography her role on the board of directors of a conservative group that's been criticized for its role in the insurrection in Washington, D.C., according to the Tampa Bay Times. Her official website for the Florida Attorney General details her role as, quote, recognized as a national leader among Republicans with the Rule of Law Defense Fund. That's the group that did the robocalls on January 5th saying, show up tomorrow in D.C. This is nuts.